I'm Allison Knowlton Mason.
I'm Stanley Bradley, and we're friends turned family, getting together to tell stories, laugh, observe, and think.
This is the family meeting. Okay, so we are excited to be welcoming another fun guest, a member of our family from a much longer ago. We haven't connected in a while. And so we're excited to have Christina Jarvie with us today. Welcome,
Yay!
Christina.
Thanks,
It's so
guys.
good to see you. Start by telling us, just give the audience, our illustrious audience, some background. How do you know us and what are you up to right now in life?
Yeah, so we go way back to ATL circa 2004, is it? I think it was
that's
2004.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I do believe, Allison, you introduced yourself to me my first week of teaching, and I don't even really remember much of the encounter because I was so flustered and but you were so patient. I think that you are one of my extrovert. I tend to be a little introverted. I just withdraw and but you didn't give up on me. And
I was like, this is a new Teach for America teacher. I was like, I feel like I need to bring her into the fold because I was not that warmly welcomed as a Teach for America teacher. And so I was like, let me say hi to this girl and see if we can maybe be friends. And here we are.
And I'm so glad you did. So yeah, we became friends at Benteen Elementary School.
Yeah.
A long time ago. And Stan, I met Stan through you, and I remember many dinners. I remember serving you artichokes, I think, Stan, or meatballs or something Sicilian in my apartment in Buckhead. I remember.
Yeah. My mom still makes pumpkin roll. So
Aw.
yeah, is obsessed with pumpkin roll. I think we have it every Thanksgiving now. So
Aw. And then Allison and I lived together for a period of time. You were in Buckhead with me too for a little bit, weren't you?
I was, yes, because we were already talking about moving in together, and then my landlords were going to raise my rent, and so I was like, I can just finish out your lease with you, which that was the only time I would ever live that far north in Atlanta. I was a east kind of girl. I like the east side. So what are you up to now, Christina?
So now I am, I'm a mother, teacher, wife, gardener, and generally a cultivator of life, I think.
Ooh.
I think that is what I am. I cultivate life, right?
I love that.
Whether it be, in my family and my children, or in my garden with my plants or my students. I had taken some time off to raise my son, and this past year was my first year back teaching in the classroom, and we started virtually, and that was really tricky, but I don't think I was in person until April, but was still able to cultivate life, right, and to encourage these kids. I'm a fifth grade teacher, so it's kind of a fun age where kids are just starting to figure out who they are and make choices about who they want to be, and they're really able to think deeply. And so I've had just a lot of fun, right? Inspiring kids and challenging them and equipping them with the tools that they need to take that next step into middle school, which we all know is the best time of life. Said no one ever. But if you can get that solid foundation, right? The choices that you make are a little different. So I actually just had one of my students, he had a graduation party yesterday, and he's going off and doing this Verdo thing. I don't know much about it, but anyway, it's just those connections that you make with students and seeing it play out long term, and then being old enough to remember and be able to come back and say that was
my fifth grade teacher. Yeah.
So that has been amazing, but this year was a little wild.
That's
sure. I mean, I will say you are one of the best teachers I've ever experienced in person.
I was just gonna say that. I'm so fascinated now because I want to have a different conversation with you because I know that you were brilliant at early childhood.
Yes, kindergarten.
You were one of the most amazing kindergarten teachers.
Yes.
And so I really am fascinated, and this may have to be offline, but I'm really fascinated, and I kind of want you to talk a little bit, what is that transition like from kindergarten to fifth grade? What has that been like?
I mean, I think good teaching is still good teaching, right?
You
still have to treat them like they're deaf aliens, but they're really helpful. They're helpful in a different way, right? Like
Yeah.
they can blow their own nose, right? Or
Yeah.
tie their own shoes, you know. But I think for me, my belief that like human beings are fundamentally good and kind and like want to do the right thing, right? You just capitalize on that with older kids, like, and you kind of ask yourself, who do you want to be? Like, what kind of life do you want to live? And that just sort of intrinsically motivates them. So it's a little different. You don't have to have as many concrete motivators, right? For kids, you can really tap into the intrinsic piece. But
Yeah.
I love it. I love fifth grade and kindergarten are my two favorite grades for sure.
Yeah. And that's so funny because some people have that instinct, like you're either primary or your upper grades. But I'm glad to see that you're doing both. You're dispelling that myth. And I know you're doing a great job at it.
So to pivot slightly to the topic for today, we're talking about place. And part of the reason we asked you to join us for this conversation is because we knew you in a very specific place in your life. And now you are, and even then, and I was thinking about this yesterday, that like, even then you were very oriented towards home. In a way that I am not always, right? And I'm not oriented to my hometown in the same way. And so I always thought that was super interesting. And then the fact that you transitioned back, I would love for you to just like talk about like what's your place of origin and how does it like shape who you are now, where you are now?
Yeah, so I think my place of origin, I was born in Chestertown, Maryland, and I wanted to acknowledge that it was originally inhabited by the Ozini tribe, which was a Native American tribe that inhabited the sort of like along the Chester River of the Eastern Shore. And Churchill, which is where I currently reside, there's no evidence that Native American tribes were, exactly, in this location. They likely were. It was probably Ozini tribe or another tribe that hasn't been discovered yet. But I did want to acknowledge that, yes, my place of origin here is Chestertown, Chestertown, Maryland, Churchill, Maryland, but that it was, originally inhabited by other folks. Now I grew up on the Eastern Shore here in Churchill, but my father immigrated from Delia, Sicily. My daughter's name is Delia. I named her after the town where he was from. And so there's a very big like part of me, right, that claims that place as my place of origin, because even though she immigrated with my father in, goodness, I don't know, it was probably 1958 or 9. He was 7 or 8 years old. It's still a part of who I am, and it influences choices that I make. And so I claim that as a piece of my origin. And Sicily, the town where they're from, is very small, and there isn't a whole lot there. And folks there are they don't have a lot of material wealth. And so I think all of those pieces, have sort of influenced me. It was mountainous. And then my mom, she grew up in Pennsylvania, and I was very close with my mom's mom, and she was a Pennsylvania farm girl. And farming in Pennsylvania is not very easy. And so it's very, sort of the terrain is rocky. And so I think from that place, I learned a lot about, working hard and taking what you have and doing something with it, right? So I think I claim all three of those places as my place of origin, right? But rooted like in the Eastern Shore. My Nonna lived with us when I was younger, and so I think I think all of these elements of identity are sort of woven in all of these places. But again, they sort of took root on the Eastern Shore, and that's sort of why I always had this tug and this pull back to this place.
So again, we knew you when you lived in Atlanta, which how long were you in Atlanta? 3 or 4 years?
4 years. Yeah, 4.
And did you go from Atlanta back to Maryland, or was there a stop in between?
Yeah, so I went from Atlanta. I sort of see this as being like my bridge time. Interestingly enough, I chose to leave Atlanta and go and get my master's degree And I wanted to move closer to my family. So I chose to move to Washington, D.C.
That's right.
And I was working at the first all-girl public charter in the city. And I was able to get my master's degree and do that at the same time. And 2 weeks before I left, I met my husband. God was like, so you've made this choice to move, and now and he lived in Atlanta.
Oh, that's so funny.
So
He was, because he's a
wild.
pilot. So he was just visiting or something, or passing through.
We met at a wedding in New Jersey. So it was just a girl who I had gone to college with, grew up with Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And she and I were roommates in college. And so we met at her wedding, and then we moved. And then, this guy is like a pilot, and he's from Atlanta, and I've got 2 weeks left in the city. And so we were like, how can we see each other like every day that you're around, so we can figure out if this is worth it or not. And then I was going on a road trip, remember? Like I drove all the way across the country. So we decided, it was wild. So we decided, you know what, we like each other. This is worth it. And so then we dated long distance when I was living in Washington, D.C. And then he would, fly back, and we sort of flew back and forth and visited each other. And then after we got married, we would drive back over to the Eastern Shore and visit my family. And so when we did that, I mean, we would just relax and just have we just felt so grounded, right? Like that's the only thing that I have to say about the Eastern Shore. There was no traffic. Like it's, there's a lot of natural like wildlife and river and things like that. And so we just made the decision, you know what, let's just move. But I had a job that I really loved. I was the director of curriculum instruction and assessment at a school. And so I decided to commute for a year. But after that, we kind of decided that was a little too much. And then that's when I switched to fifth grade, and I taught fifth grade for 5 years before I had Joey. So.
All right.
I think it was a bridge. That period, it was a bridge, right? Like that time in Washington, it's sort of Jason and I, we were able to get married. And I think we sort of started to see, those transitions illuminated for us what we valued.
And where's he from?
He's from Wisconsin. He's from Cedarburg, Wisconsin. So it was more familiar. Cedarburg is a smaller town. It's just north of Milwaukee. But the traffic, I think it was just, DC traffic was just a lot for us.
I like that idea though, that you talked about of a place grounding you, because I feel like that's what some places just do. Like even, like we enjoy places, but I really feel like that idea of just being grounded, that's making me think about as much as I love Atlanta, the place where I feel most like at home and myself is in Alabama, is where my parents grew up, Trana, which is not the house that I grew up in, but it's the place where my family always gathers and comes together. And so even though I love Atlanta and Atlanta feels like home, that idea of being grounded in some place, I think is something that we all kind of strive for, even if it's not something that I feel like it probably came a little more natural for you because you were born there, your family's still there. I think that's a really interesting concept. I like that idea.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I think as I'm listening to you guys talk, I'm like, I don't know that I have a place like that. Like, I don't know that I have a place where like I get there and I'm like, you know what I'm saying? And I think it's just interesting. Like, this is just dawning on me listening to you all. But I think for me, I have always just been like a super independent person. Like, I'm an Aries, which I think is one of the main characteristics of Aries is being independent. And I try, I think I made some notes about this to talk about later, but like, I like to nest and I like to like set up a place pretty quickly. When I moved to Miami, I moved on a Thursday and I was completely unpacked by the end of day Sunday, because I was just like, I don't think I like it here. At the very least, I need my apartment to feel really good. And so I think that's so interesting. I may have to come back to this later in the episode, but I'm just like, I feel like I tried to like ground myself where I am. And I think we talked about this in the first season when we talked about places, this idea of like feeling at home in yourself, which takes nothing away from that, you know, like a grounding place. But I think for me, I tried to, because I don't feel tied to Akron, I think I did a lot of growing up in Atlanta. And so I have a lot of love for Atlanta and what it did for me. But I think as much as I didn't like Miami at first, I did a ton of work to try and get comfortable in myself in Miami. And then meeting Lance obviously had a lot to do with that. So it's interesting. I don't have a closing on that thought, but that raised some interesting thoughts.
I do think, again, if you think about the three of us, the one thing I think common around our friendship is that we did have those families, again, that gave us those roots, right? Mm-hmm. So like, even though your family is kind of like, Akron was your roots. So even if it's not a place that's grounding, it's a place where you got your start.
Right.
And again, it's like having those roots allows you to transition and mm-hmm. have that, you know, have that idea that wherever you are physically, there's still kind of this internal thing that's inside of you, I think.
Yeah. Christina, I would love to put that to you too. This question of like roots versus wings. And how, like, I think Stan said it in the first episode about like that those roots give you wings. And so I'm curious, like, how has this transition played, you know, all these different transitions, Atlanta, the bridge in DC and back now in Maryland, played out for you in terms of roots and wings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think for roots, right. I think it goes back to identity, right. For mm-hmm. me, like at the end of the day, who am I? And who am I changes and shifts, right. But there are certain components about me that aren't going to change. And so I think, you know, those are some of those roots. Like I'm always going to try to be an achiever, no matter what it is, no matter what role I'm in, right? Like that's just a part of who I am. And I think that, you know, having that strong identity and having that strong foundation, you know, has enabled me to make choices that align with, you know, what I want versus what my family needs versus what others might perceive as being like success or what I should be doing or shouldn't be doing. Like, for example, I mean, I took steps back. Like I was on like fast track. Like I was in a New Leaders, New Schools program to like become a principal in DC. And I took some really serious like steps back, and I sort of moved into a more supportive role, like supporting my husband to achieve some of the things that he wanted. And I think if I didn't have that strong identity or the strong sense of self or the strong knowledge of who I am and what I'm capable of, right, that's that roots part. Like if I didn't know who I was, right, I might have felt like I had to allow others to determine my worth and my value based on my profession, mm-hmm. right? Or based on what I could achieve professionally. Mm-hmm. And so I took a big step back when I went back into the classroom. And then again, when I just resigned to like be a stay-at-home mom. So, you know, yeah, I think, but it goes back to like, you know, what it is, what is it that I value? What is it that's going to give me and my family the quality of life that we want, and prioritizing that over, you know, money or being in some fancy city. I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful, but so
yeah, that is really interesting that you talk about that transition from being like an administrator to like, you know, you tell most people who work in a school setting that you're going back to the classroom, they look at you like you have three heads. right? Like so that's something I think that's really, but like you said, having that grounding and knowing, okay, this is the place where I need to be now, I think is super important. You got to always just make the best decisions for yourself, I think, and know what's important around your family. So it's pretty impressive, actually, if you think about it in a lot of ways, to be able to, because I'm sure there was pressure. People were like, are you sure this is what you want to do? And like you said, having that foundation to know this is what's important, I think.
And I think like the 3 words, it's grounded, right? Grounded and lifted, right? Like you can be both, right? You're grounded and you're lifted, right? And inspired, and then you can start being creative, when you're able to be grounded, lifted, and inspired, like there's just a lot. You're living your best life.
Yeah. I like that. That was the word. Grounded and lifted. That's right. The word from this episode.
I'm curious, and this is like slightly off topic, and this is a little personal, honestly, like that, I'm in this at the age and at stage in life where I'm like considering having a child, and like you, I'm achievement oriented. And so I'm curious to just hear you talk more about the intersection between your achievement orientation and motherhood.
Yeah, gosh.
Which is not a question I ask you in advance to prep for, but that is like what's top of mind for me right now.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a failure every day.
Oh my gosh.
Every moment. No, but also like that's also me, right? Like being achievement oriented. Like you can't, like, it's just kids are, they're tough. And you kind of have to be there in the moment with them and take whatever they're giving and just try to do the best with it that you can. I mean, I think for me, when it comes to achievement and motherhood, I almost have to like not even think about them together, right? Like, because if I did, I think I just would never, I don't know. I feel like I would never feel like I was good enough or doing enough or, whatever. So instead I just try to meet my kids where they are and try to, understand what they're trying to communicate and again, be with them like in their moment, whatever they're feeling, whatever they're experiencing, and just moving forward through that. When I first stayed at home with my daughter, and my son, he was little, so he, needed to be fed, he needed to be changed, he needed to be bathed. Like it was pretty easy, right? And I was exhausted, but like was sort of how I measured my success, right? Like my kid is, and Dahlia had a hole in her heart. And so she was a little trickier. Like I had to, she had, it eventually closed, but she had a VSD up until she was 3 years old, and it made feeding very difficult for her. So like my measure of success with her was like, how much did she drink? Like how many ounces did this baby? And then like, what are her bowel movements and, all of that lovely stuff. But, but as they get older, that changes. So then when I was staying home with Joey, I was like, we had rituals and things that was sort of, you sort of have your day, you have your week, and all of those things that was sort of how we measured our success. And, and now that they're older and more independent, and it changes as you go on, but in this moment, right, for me as a mom, like I just want them, and during a pandemic, right, I want them to develop healthy coping mechanisms because life is hard, and resilience, right? Yeah. Like resilience. We gonna get through this. You're gonna be all right, baby. Like you are gonna be fine. Like you are not gonna starve. I promise. I promise. You are not gonna starve, baby. But Dahlia picked up piano like during the pandemic, but we did like virtual piano, and that was amazing to see. Like tensions would build, right? Things were uncertain. She'd hear Jason and I talk or check our phones or whatever, and she would like slip away and go play piano. And now the same thing happens. Like if things get intense for her or she starts feeling a big feeling, she goes and plays her piano. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm done. I did my parenting duty. Like this child is going to be successful, right? Because maybe, hopefully, right? At least she has a healthy coping mechanism, right? I gave her that.
Right. Right. I mean, the other thing I'll say just from creeping on your Facebook page is, again, the combination of the fact that you're like such a good teacher and like the things that I've seen where you do like these like summer camps and things where, again, sort of to pivot back to the place idea of like physical space and how you create, like have taken your home and turned it into an actual camp. I think there was a theater production that happened or something. And so talk to me about like your physical place and how that like contributes to like your mental, emotional, spiritual place for you and for the kids.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is my kindergarten teacher completely. Like they have a playroom, right? And they have like an art space. They have like a quiet corner with like books and stuffed animals and like sensory stuff for when they need to take a break, which they identify. I do not send them there.
These kids are going to be okay.
Yeah,
like all the kids, these kids are going to be okay.
Yep. And, you know, so like it's set up like a kindergarten classroom, basically. So that is a space that helps the kids to be creative and to develop their language and to, you know, be kids, right? And grow. And then there's a bathroom that's tiled and they do like art stuff. Like they can take anything. And I don't worry about the mess. They don't, you know, it is what it is. So that's kind of like their creative learning space. And then Jason, we finished our basement for COVID because he's a pilot and it's like his quarantine space. And this is before we were all vaccinated. Nobody knew what was going on. My parents were watching Joey because he couldn't get into the school because of Jason's job. Anyway, there's this whole thing. I was teaching. So we refinished the basement so he would have a place to be. And he found a giant slide, like giant, like hamster, think like hamster slide, like a yellow, like curly, like slide, like
at the playground.
Yes, or like a fast food restaurant, right? Like with a play place. He installed it into our base. So instead of going down the stairs, the kids slide down the slide.
Well,
that is amazing.
That's advanced. That's parenting. Like
that is advanced.
That's graduate level parenting. All of that. I am now planning to come to Churchill and slide on the slide.
Yep.
Do you ever use it?
I do. It's actually faster. It's easier to get to the freezer.
I feel like I would be like, kids, that's my slide.
Yeah. So they have a slide. And then we also have outdoor space, right? So we've got my garden, which is like very special to me. It's where Mimi is buried, my kitty cat.
Mimi!
Please share it with the people about Mimi. Because if I do it, I'm not gonna do it right. Because she and I didn't have a great relationship.
She didn't have a great relationship with anybody. She liked you okay, Stan, right?
Yeah, I think she liked me okay.
She liked you. Yeah. She was just like a Siamese cat. She was part Siamese. She was white. They found her in a car. I'll never forget. I went to take her to get neutered. And the vet called me in the middle of the day and I was really worried something happened, but it turns out that she had a different anatomy and they wanted to make me aware of this. And I was like, what? I was like, anyway, I have that very vivid memory about Mimi, but she had very strong opinions about people. And she was a very good judge, generally, of character.
I feel kind of away because she didn't like me. She tried to bite me once,
but there were other people who she did other things to. Well, Jason, when we were dating, he got snowed in with me and we were settling in for the night and she climbed up on his leg and urinated on him. Like he was just like done. He was ready to kick her out of the apartment. So she never did that to you.
No, she didn't. And the only reason I was close enough to even almost get bit was because she had kind of walked over to me and like did this whole like, you can pet me, but apparently I did it wrong. And so in that sense, I guess I can say she tolerated me.
She did.
Yeah.
Yes. There were others that had other issues. Anyway, so when we moved into this house, she developed some kind of like kidney issue. And so she passed away within the first like couple weeks of living here.
Oh my gosh.
So we had a fig tree that my uncle had like clipped from his fig tree. We had like, clippings, and they grow like if you have just like a branch or whatever, they root. So we decided to bury her under the fig tree. And then now we have like 3 figs. It's like a fig grove and like herbs and stuff that we've planted. So we've ingested Mimi at this point. She's probably in my children too. So
that's like sweet and horrifying.
Mimi is everywhere.
Mimi figs. Oh gosh. Stan, what about you? How does physical space influence your place?
I think it definitely does. When I am like, when my physical space is comfortable, I'm comfortable, right? Now, I'm not always the neatest person or the most organized person ever. So, but at the same time, when I get too unorganized and I get too uncomfortable, then I have to fix that physical space. So I think it's kind of like, it's like a circle, like a yin yang kind of thing. And just thinking about Christina talking about her garden, which I want to hear more about. Outdoors. And I'm not like a let's go hike, let's go sleep outside kind of person. But I do think that being out like rejuvenates me in some way. Like if I spend like a whole day inside, I'm gonna be off. Like and like the older I get, the more I realize it, like, oh, you're a little bit cranky because you haven't been outside today. Or oh, you're cranky because like you haven't been outside today. You need to go get some fresh air. That's what's wrong with you. So I definitely think that like, for me, it's kind of like a circle thing. It's definitely a circle. I don't know which one comes first, but it influences each other.
Yeah. No, I completely resonate with that. And I think it's funny to have Christina on the phone because I have not had many roommates in life. And that's on purpose because I am kind of a terrible roommate. Like I like to be able to put my shit wherever I want. And I don't want anyone to put their shit out. And so I would just apologize to you for being an awful roommate in that way. But I had found, Stan, that my tolerance for mess has gone down over the years. Because I used to be just a slob. But as I get older, like that, like you said, that feeling of being uncomfortable because things are messy, it just like the barrier of that is just, it gets smaller and smaller. And then living with Lance, who is like not a messy person at all, I then also have like side eyes from him to deal with. So then I'm like, well, okay, let me clean my stuff up before I get a side eye from my husband. And I don't want to have to deal with that. But yeah, no, I definitely resonate with that same idea. And then I'm not an outdoory person like you, Stan. I'm not like I asked Lance literally yesterday if he wanted to go camping. I don't know why I asked him that. I think I saw somebody going camping and he was like, no. And I was like, in my head, I was like, I don't either. So I don't know why I'm saying that, but I do care a lot about light. So that's my thing that I was reflecting on as I was prepping, is that like, this is my office. I sit here, to do the business thing all day, every day. And I care so much about the fact that this room is bright. Like if this room was not bright, I don't know how I would be able to be productive in here. But I also realized that for me, brightness equals like achieving and like striving. And like when I want to rest, I don't want light. And for some reason, like those two things are like connected. So like, I remember during Christmas break at some point, we like did like a Marvel marathon. And we did that in the dark, like, even though it was December in Miami, which is one of the best times to be in Miami because it's not like 90 trillion degrees. we just like did it in the dark and it felt so good. Like I was like, that feels like the way to rest, which is like a strange reflection that like rest equals darkness, light equals work. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah. It's something there. Cause like, right. Cause like sometimes you just want to turn off the lights and light some candles and watch some TV.
Yeah.
Right. And just kind of decompress.
Or just like have the light of the screen be the only light that you that you would take in that day. Like I was thinking what you said about going outside, Stan, like that. It's probably vitamin D that you need.
Yeah.
And we are all vitamin D deficient. Every doctor I go to, every time I get blood work, they're like, your vitamin D is low, like everybody else. And so I'm like, oh.
I think too, like this light and sunlight too, like I've noticed like the east and the west, right? Like, and being like in the eastern part of my house, right? Like that's where I do my stretching in the morning and the sun rises, right? And it just brings me up to like face the day. And then my office is on the east side of the house. The bedroom, this actually used to be the nursery, so that it would wake the kids up, and that used to drive me bonkers. But their bedrooms are in the west, and I've noticed like at the end of the day when I come home, like, and I just want to sit for a minute and catch my breath before I start making dinner, I'll go in the west. Like we've got a living room on the west side of the house, right? And so like I hear this, like there's something with light, right?
Yeah.
There's something with sunlight and mornings, afternoons, and kind of where you are and where you naturally like orient yourself to be.
Yeah. I think there's like very definitely research about circadian rhythms and the light and all that. I'm not good at any of that, but I think that might be what you're speaking of in terms of like reacting with the sun and moving in a natural way. This is I think about, like you mentioned, like Native American tribes, and it's like, again, I don't want to sleep outside, but when I think about like how people used to live, there was no electricity. Like you had to react to the sun and the moon and things like that. And that, again, thought with no period, but
yeah. But I mean, even if you just think about like artificial spaces, right? Even, there's something about being in a space that's natural, that's less manufactured. Like, like you can tell, and it's not necessarily about it being whether indoors or outdoors, but to me, there are kind of spaces where you can tell that have been composed naturally, if that makes any sense, with like people's feelings. I get, maybe the word I'm looking for is artificial, like, right? Like when you're in an artificial place, a place that doesn't seem real, I think that has an effect on how you move. Like I think probably for all of us, wherever we call home feels very real. And so that's the thing that you react to, right? So like, if you like, like I said, like more and more I find like going out to, and I think maybe the pandemic has kind of brought some of this on too, but like just going to stores and stuff, places where like it's designed for a purpose, but it's just real artificial. You find that you don't want to spend your time there as you get older, right? Because I think that's part of why it's a chore to do chores, because you're in these places that are just artificial and not very real. Yeah. And that's why you're always kind of longing for being home, or like even when you're home, building your own spaces that feel real. I think that definitely that space that you build, that physical space, making that physical space real, affects how you feel.
That resonates with me a ton as it relates to my classroom, like the classroom where I was in this year. Even though I wasn't in person until April, like I had to get in and get the classroom ready in August, and there's a whole ritual right behind all of that, cleaning out, reorganizing and redistributing, and sort of getting to know the space. It's like it's a relationship. You have a relationship with your space, and there were no windows in this room, which I didn't realize at first. Like it was supposed to have been a computer lab. Did your computer lab have windows, Stan?
Yeah, I think yeah.
It's like an internal room connected to the media center.
I don't understand not giving kids light. Like that whole 70s idea where the children don't we have this one building in our district. It has no windows. It was like one of the, at all. It was one of those 70s high schools that apparently they built. It was supposed to be energy efficient. And I think maybe the newer editions, but it has no windows.
That sounds horrible.
I'm like, who thought this was a good idea?
No. So we did an experiment, Stan, because we were like, what can survive in this environment?
Yeah.
And we bought a bunch of different plants and we tried sun therapy, whatever. I mean, it got us through till the end, but I moved classrooms this year.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that same thing, like what you were talking about, sort of making, making the space your own, cleaning, going through, but this one has windows and it's east facing, which is going to be great.
Yeah.
We'll get the morning sun, but
yeah.
I would feel different too. Like the other thing I noticed, by the end of the day, I was so depleted.
Yeah.
And I would just get in my car and I would drive home. And it's a quick drive. It was a 10-minute drive. But by the time I got home, I'm like, what? I feel totally different. And it was just being outside.
Yeah. And not having windows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being able to, like, even like you said, just visually interacting with the world. Like kids need to look out of a window. Like,
and it's a shame that we have to say that.
Yeah.
That should be a thing. All right. Well, any closing thoughts on place, space, how your place has affected your life, your destiny, mental, emotional, spiritual?
I think what's interesting, because like we all met in Atlanta and you two are gone and I'm still here. And one of the things I think about a lot is just that for me, how Atlanta became home in a lot of sense, like ultimately Alabama and Huntsville and Triana, that's home. But Atlanta is a different kind of home for me. And like I said, I think in some ways it spoiled me because I think I guess maybe the idea of Atlanta is what I love about it, is just this place where there are a diversity of people, where you can see where you can see Black folks at all levels, like for me, Atlanta is one of the one places where it is possible as a Black person to kind of escape, like you don't ever escape it, but to kind of escape the everydayness of racism. Particularly for me, I work with mostly Black people, that's mostly my milieu. And so for me, I think that's been an important part of the place. And it's kind of helped me to become who I am, just as a person. So just an interest, and I'm just curious about your thoughts about, how, like I said, you guys are both away from here. So just curious about your thoughts about where you are now and how that kind of relates.
Yeah, I'll go because Atlanta did what you spoke of in terms of just the density of Black people and the like expressions of Blackness that are there had so much to do with who I am now. And like I said, I did a ton of growing up in Atlanta. Moved there when I was 22, left when I was 36. So that's like a huge time when you're like figuring out who you are, especially having grown up in mostly white spaces and then choosing a college that was mostly white. There was like some tension in that transition of coming from mostly white spaces, you being used to being like the pepper and the salt, and then coming to Atlanta where I had so much to learn, right? I did like Black 101 with Stan. He's like, watch these movies. I'm like, okay, Stan, I will. And so I feel like that's where I really got comfortable in my skin as a Black person. Like, I think I would like to say that I was comfortable in my skin before that, but I think I really tapped into like who I was as an African-American in this country, started to when I was there. Just because of the safety of what you said of that, like the lowering of the amount of racist interactions that you have. And, Stan in particular, meeting and becoming friends with you had a ton to do with that, because you know, we've talked about this before, like your ability to code switch was like, that was really the first time I had seen that in that way. And you did it with such authenticity that I was like, oh no, he's not putting on, like this is all Stan, like, and in this one person, I was like, there's just all these expressions of Blackness. And so it was like very cool. And then you were just so, in ways that some other people were not, so sort of kind to me about where I was in my identity development. And, you know, we always joke about like the Black people we would be around who would like say a Black thing and I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, how do you not know about this? And you would just be like I always felt like I need to sit next to you. With certain people, I'd be like, "Stan, I don't know about that." You're like, "It's okay." And
yeah, I mean,
like you would like whisper to me what it was. I'm like, "Oh," and I can have like an appropriate reaction. And then I can ask you later,
yeah,
really, what is it? And I can engage with it later. So that was very important to who I am today. And then, you know, as an aside, like that's where I really leaned into my identity as a graphic designer going to SCAD. But then I think that work that I did there, some intentional, some not intentional, helped me in my move to Miami, which has a totally different racial hierarchy. And I had no idea about that when I moved here. None.
Yeah.
It was like, what happened?
Yeah.
I was like, these people look white. You're like, they're not. I was like, oh, okay. Talk to me about these people who look white, who are not white, and why they are being racist to me. And
yeah.
So it's fascinating. It's also terrifying to move at 36 by yourself. Absolutely terrifying. And so I think that, like I said before, like that ability to like be at home in myself, as I went for this, you know, as part of my achievement orientation, went for this job that I had always wanted, right? Like I was like, I've always wanted this job. I went to Miami to do it. That ability to like be home where I was super important. And then meeting Lance had everything to do with me now really feeling like this is home. And his family, now my family is here. And the home that we've created, you know, just us for now, cross a finger or something. I don't know. All of that is defined by like the actual, those movements. And I experienced a ton of growth moving here, a ton of growth moving to Atlanta. So yeah, geography has had everything to do with like my destiny, being able to start my business. You know, I mean, one very simple thing is the fact that I have wanted to start my own business for a long time, but my question was always like, how will I have insurance? And then I get fired during a pandemic and I'm married. So I'm like, oh, cool. I'll just hop on his insurance. Like, that's a wonderful privilege that solved that problem really easily. So yeah, lots of transitions, lots of roots planted along the way.
Yeah, I think thinking about Atlanta specifically in those 4 years of my life and that place, I think it illuminated for me. I love water. And I just remember like there was the Chattahoochee River National Park.
Yeah.
Like way up in, I can't even remember. And I remember going there, right? And the other thing that I remember was just volume of people. I think as I've learned more about myself, I think I am a bit of an empath. Like I feel other people's feelings. And so it can be really overwhelming for me to be in like large groups because I feel things and I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, I don't know. It's stressful. So I think I realized that in Atlanta, like there were just so many people all the time and there was no water. Like, I just needed to be outside. So it was landlocked. And I didn't know that about myself, right? So it illuminated that for me. The other thing that I realized, there are a couple things. One thing that I realized in that particular place, everything in Atlanta felt so polarized to me. And I grew up in the mid-Atlantic. My dad was an immigrant. And, you know, I grew up in a home where Italian was spoken, well, Sicilian was spoken. It's a dialect. You know, English, and then my extended family, all my uncles married Venezuelan women. And so we would go up to Reading all the time and be with them. And so there were lots of different language. And so I think for me, when I came to Atlanta, well, and I went to school in North Carolina, but Atlanta it just felt so one way or the other, politically, like everything, racially, like everything. It was this or that, right? And that to me was the first time that I felt that polarization. And looking back now, you know, fast forward to 2021, I'm like, wait a minute, it's probably been that way forever, right? Like everywhere in this country. It just, that was the first time that it was right there. And then I got to make choices, right, about how to respond to that. And, you know, and where are you in this place of polarization? And that was a really interesting journey. And then I remember again, thinking about place. I and correct me if this memory is wrong or right, but I remember cooking dinner one night, and I remember this was early on. And we were having conversations, because at that point in my life, we had gone through like diversity trainings and stuff like that with Teach for America. And I remember holding on to this belief that, you know, my father immigrated and assimilated, and he worked so hard. And I remember lovingly, in the context of friends, like exploring this idea that it was different for him because he was perceived as being white. And that was my first time really exploring this idea of white privilege. And I just remember feeling, you know, safe and loved and able to have those conversations over dinner and over, which is like what people do, right?
Yeah.
Like you eat,
yeah,
you connect. And so that was something else that I remember about that place. And being able to take that with me then, right, to DC. DC was different though, because I was in a much more, it was a much more homogeneous school. It was a much more homogeneous staff. Honestly, it was a little different. And things were a little, politically at least, the circles in which I was, it was a little different than the Eastern Shore. This feels a little more now. It does feel much more polarized. And so some of the lessons that I learned in Atlanta, I'm applying now to the work that I'm doing, and the way that it's just interesting professionally. You know, things that I'm seeing, interactions between staff and students, interactions between staff and staff, and the way that I respond to my students. And I'm in a part of the county where I think this particular part of the county is the only part that even has students of color. Yeah, and this particular county has not done any type of targeted professional development around any like racism, or they don't even have like diversity or include, like the words that were used like 20 years ago, like aren't even a part of things. Because and what I've heard from people who've been here through all of this is, well, we don't have that population in this county. And I'm like, and that's exactly why you need it. Like that's like just because you don't have a kid of color in your school doesn't mean that they don't need, like, it's like this whole thing. There are also layers of political things where we are on the Eastern Shore. But I am so thankful for like all of the places that are in my heart, because again, I'm able to do some things differently in the spheres that I can control.
Yeah. And I think now that you have me thinking about that, I think that that's one of the things that was really cool about that time period when you guys were here, is that we really did have a lot, like we use the word diversity very loosely, but there was like we did, between the three of us and the people that we knew, we had a very diverse, in the actual sense of the word, not just that people were Black, that people were white, but that people had different religions, people had different experiences. And so I think that we kind of, and you and Allison, like, just like the birthday party, like the thing that you guys have in common for people who don't know is that you guys like to make spaces for people to be comfortable. Like, y'all are good at that. Like, I was at your house because you both like to cook. So I just remember being at your apartment or at your house all the time eating. And just, yeah, and just like, no, I do. I totally do. You guys know you cooked all the time, and I was over there freeloading.
But a donation cup by the door.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about that because I'm thinking about, like you said, and so we were able to create that space where we can have those conversations with humor, with intelligence, knowing that everybody came from a genuine place. And it was, like you said, with that diversity of experience in the true sense of the word.
Yeah.
And that was like you said, thinking back on that now, like, I don't know if you could do that now, just because people are so polarized. But we were able to have that experience in that place that I think was really unique.
Yeah.
And fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, thank you guys for that conversation. What's up for you, Christina?
What's up for me? Well, there's a book that I have been meaning to pre-order for the past couple weeks, and that's my goal this week, is to order it off Amazon. It's called Eat Like a Human, and our neighbor / friend is a professor of anthropology, and he and his whole family have started this whole like modern Stone Age food movement. And he did this like documentary on oh goodness, I think it's called Eat Like a Human. No, it was something else. It was anyway. He basically is an anthropologist that studies how humans' diets have changed over time and how that has affected like their brain development, and sort of it's this relationship between humans and food, right? And so his goal as this anthropologist is to kind of take what we have around us and try to eat in a way that is as close to our ancestors as possible so that we can get the maximum nourishment from the food. So for me, when I was, after I gave birth to Joey, I dealt with like some pretty debilitating like postpartum, like back and neck issues. I fell when I was pregnant with him, and I was holding Dahlia. So there's all this degeneration and stuff that happened in my spine. And one of the recommendations that my doctor had was to go on this paleo AIP diet to help reduce inflammation. And so around the same time, I was starting to stay home, with my son. And so I attended a couple lectures that this Dr. Bill Schindler gave at the college about this different approach to eating and to food and to nourishment. And so I got really interested, obviously, like how can I use food to help heal my body? And so anyway, we've learned a ton from him and his family. They are all wonderful. Jason's butchered a deer with him. He had never like killed a deer ever in his life, and like went hunting, butchered the deer. His son is like butchers, Billy, butchers. His daughter just created a sourdough bakery called Rise during the pandemic, and was like donating sourdough loaves to like food pantries and stuff like that. But basically the process of the sourdough, it like pre-digests the like flour and the gluten. So it actually helps your body to access the food. So a lot of people who are gluten intolerant can eat sourdough because it's sort of pre-done for them. And then they have this other process called nixtamalization, where you nixtamalize corn. And so Dr. Schindler has traveled to, I can't remember where in Mexico, but to places, right, where they still practice these traditional forms of food preparation and learned about them. But basically the nixtamalization of the corn allows that to be digestible for humans, because really our intestines are not designed to eat corn. And so you can eat it all day, but like you're not going to get any of the nutrients from it because your body's not actually digesting it unless it's nixtamalized. So anyway, this book is called Eat Like a Human, and it has recipes and all kinds of things, but I have really, Jason and I both have learned a ton from Bill and his family, and I could not recommend it more. So that is on my list for this week. Pre-order the book. It comes out on November 16th.
All right.
That sounds fascinating.
I might have to grab that. That's fascinating. Stan, what's up for you?
Nothing nearly as informative or beneficial. I have been watching TikTok dances.
Sir.
Really, I've been watching like reels, and then they come from TikTok. I mean, it's just crazy. Like
what does this have to do with the Black creator strike?
Okay, well,
are they back making dances? Have you heard about the strike?
Yeah, I heard about the strike. This is, I guess, I don't know if these were dances before the strike. Well, and they're not all, like one of them, the Fancy Like, is a country dance that country music folks.
You said country people.
People who like country music, I should say. And then like the coincidence, which is the other one, is because I saw 2 Dancing with the Stars people do it. Okay. And I was like, this is funny. And then like it's just funny to watch people do these dances, because like you start with like the people who actually create the dance, and then it just kind of goes downhill from there. So it's kind of funny to watch people like not do them not well. Uh-huh. And I mean, it's just something I do to pass the time. I'm like,
that's hilarious. How do you find them? Does the algorithm like pushes them to you once you start?
Once you see one, then on your search, it's gonna always show up.
Okay. Well, you should link some in the show notes, some of the good ones.
I will.
Or the delightfully bad ones. Yeah.
Yes, I will. I will do that.
Yeah.
What about you?
So you all know that I listen to I don't like the word weird, but folks have called the music that I listen to weird. And so again, Spotify's algorithm pushes me this music. And so I listen to my Discover Weekly religiously. Like every Monday morning I click it and I try to give it like a full pass, liking the songs that I like. Some songs are so good that I have to click right into the album and then listen. And literally this week I got to a song. It was so good. I went to the album and I listened to the album the rest of the week. I don't even think I went back to my Discover Weekly.
Oh, wow.
And I'm warning you in advance. If you look it up, you probably won't like it. It's weird. This group is called Novo Amor. And my friend Eric named the type of music that I like Doors Off the Track, which Doors Off the Track is his like rude way to make up like a fake band name. And in preparation, I was trying to think like, what is Doors Off the Track? Doors Off the Track is hipstery music that is typically quiet and soft with lush instrumentals and melodramatic lyrics.
That's good.
I made that up. I feel good about that. So anyway, Novo Amor is what Spotify led me to, and I'm obsessed. Like it doesn't match. And I mean, in my apartment, it works great while I'm working, but like in the car, I'm driving around Miami. It's hot. I have the windows down. The music does not match. It's like quiet. There's like some guy singing falsetto, and there's like, electric guitar in the back. It's weird. It's weird, but Novo Amor is what I'm deeply into this week.
Wow.
So, don't look it up.
You gotta
save yourself. Save yourself the trouble. All right. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. It's been
great.
Amazing. Here we go. Support for this podcast comes from Lilacs on York Creative Studios.
The Family Meeting is produced by me and Allison.
Our theme song is by Will Salua, and it is entitled 135th and Coffee.
Christina, how can people get in contact with you?
People are more than welcome to send me an email, christina.kupani@gmail.com, or find me on Facebook, Christina Kupani Jarvie.
You can find the show notes on what we discussed, including links posted in the blog section on lilacsonyork.com.
And you can keep up with the show on Instagram at lilacsonyork and on Twitter at The Family Meeting. You can also now watch us have these conversations on the Lilacs on York channel on YouTube. You can find me on social at Allison K. Mason on IG and Twitter, even though I do not tweet.
You can find me on social at Twice11 on IG and Twitter, even though I do not post on IG. Thanks for listening.
Meet you here next week.